Hey guys, I'm Erik Peterson and I'm a men's dating and relationship coach for 𝗧𝗵𝗲 and today's attraction tips video is called Does Size Matter? Now this is something that I've never really thought about in my adult life. I mean, yes, of course, when I was younger, I often worried about this. I mean, just like a lot of you, but I guess I got enough positive feedback from women that I just stopped worrying about it at some point. However, like a majority of you, I've always wished that I was just at least a little bigger, but does it even really matter? For one thing, porn has completely ruined our perception of how men should be equipped. We see these guys with a member the size of a baby's forearm just plowing away at a woman who is in turn just screaming in ecstasy. Then we think, hell yeah, I want that. That's what I need to make the lady scream. And I mean, for most straight men, we have nothing else to compare ourselves to. I mean, I can't speak for every straight man out there, but I'm certainly not checking out other men's junk to compare. So we pretty much have only porn to look to for comparison. Regardless, there's really not a lot that we could do about our size anyway. I mean, women, they could get their boobs done. And while there is such a thing as surgery to enlarge your member, I really don't think that most of us want any knives around our junk. Even though it would be making things bigger, I mean, I know I sure don't. And the thought of that just makes me cringe. In fact, urologists recommend that only if you have a micro penis that you should even consider getting a surgical penis enlargement. So because we don't really have options with that, then we're more or less just stuck with what the universe gave us. But again, does it even really matter? I mean, are women even looking for men who are more hung? Is it going to make her more orgasmic? Do women snicker behind our backs about our size? I mean, is she dreaming about a man who has a bigger member? Will she leave me for a guy who's bigger? I mean, I'm sure these are all questions that you've asked yourself over the years at one time or another. A lot of you guys ask me this question, does size matter? And since I've never really looked into it, my answer is always, well, to be honest, I'm not sure. And I mean, I have my suspicions, of course, but I've never really looked into the studies about it. So I thought this would be a good topic to cover because your confidence in yourself, your worth, your body all makes a big difference when attracting women. So in this attraction tips video, I'm going to be discussing just that. Does size matter to women? And after I've done some extensive research on this topic, I think you might be a little surprised. But if you guys need my personal help and you're interested in some private coaching, please head over to my website at 𝗧𝗵𝗲 click on the coaching tab, and there you'll see that I have several options for you to choose from. I offer standard email coaching as well as emergency email coaching, which includes a response from me on weekends and holidays. And I also offer both bi-weekly and monthly email coaching where I'll work with you throughout that time period. Additionally, I offer phone coaching for my North American clients. Now, if you live outside North America, I know some of you have been on my case about this. I finally have something for you guys. And it's Zoom coaching. And it works just like phone coaching, except you get to see me throughout the entire hour. My available times will probably not be ideal for many of you, depending on where you live, of course, but obviously I can't be available 24 hours a day. Anyway, you'll find a link to my Zoom coaching on my phone coaching page. So just go the normal route, click on phone coaching, and you'll see it there. And I'll post the links to both my contact page and my coaching page in the description down below. Now first, I think it's important that you understand the stats. There have been numerous studies done on men's size, what's big, what's small, and what's average. The problem with these studies is many of them are done on the honor system. In other words, they ask men to measure themselves at home and submit the information. The thing is, since many men are often insecure about their size, it's theorized that many of them are just fudging the numbers just a bit to come across as a little bigger than they really are. But then the problem with these studies being administered by professionals is most of the men who come in to have their member measured are typically the men who are on the bigger side because they're not insecure about others seeing them. At least that's the theory. So the outcome of these studies vary a bit, but they're all pretty close. The numbers I'm using here are basically the averages of the studies that I read. So, drum roll, the average size is somewhere between 4.5 to 5.5 inches long, or 11.43 centimeters to 12.7 centimeters long. And that's with a girth of approximately 4.5 inches or 11.43 centimeters. I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you guys, but that's all I could do. Of course, the studies where the men measured themselves is on the bigger or on the higher end of that. And one of the bigger, more popular studies say that 5.1 inches is the average. So if you're in that area, you're doing just fine in terms of your size. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are, busting out the tape measure right about now. So the way that it's measured is by pushing the ruler against your pelvic bone. And if you got fat there, push it against that and measuring along the top all the way to the tip. And to measure the girth, which is really just the circumference, you measure around the thickest part. Now, what do women think about that size? Well, according to the studies, a large majority of the women find their partner's size to be just fine. I mean, it's something like 84% of the women, with only 14% of the women wishing their partner was bigger. And 6% just flat out said the partner was too small. And surprisingly, 2% wishing their partner was actually smaller. Now, I'm assuming that 2% are for the men that are just hung like a telephone pole. So yes, you can be too big for your girl. In fact, according to the studies, women prefer average-sized men for long-term relationships, with the studies showing that women prefer a man to be no bigger than 6.3 inches long and a girth no bigger than 4 inches. However, for a short-term fling or like a one-night stand, women would like a guy to be a bit on the bigger side, which means they would prefer a man to be 6.4 inches long and a girth of 4.9 inches or bigger. And what's interesting here is that only 5% of the men out there are bigger than 6.3 inches long. So if you're 6.4 inches long and a 4.9 inch girth, you're considered big, believe it or not. And if you're 8 inches or longer, you're considered huge, but only 1% of men are 8 inches or longer. I mean, so those guys are out there, but they're very rare. And I bet if you're on the bigger side of average or in the big category as opposed to huge, I'm guessing women have already commented on your size before, or at the very least, she hasn't experienced any bigger since most men are just not that big. Oh, and just to throw it in there, 3 inches or shorter is considered a micropenis, but only 5% of men are smaller than 3.9 inches. I also wanted to be sure to mention that these studies also showed no credible evidence that sizes vary between races, despite popular belief. I can only go by the studies since, like I said, I'm not going around comparing guys' junk. And the studies say that you hearing any different, that size varies between races, whether a particular race is bigger or smaller, is a total myth. It's just what the science says. So what do women think about all this? Well, like I said, an average-sized man is preferred for a long-term relationship, and they prefer a bigger man for short-term, purely sexual flings. I also took a look at the average size dildos women buy, just to see if women were just being nice in these studies about sizes. And it wasn't all that different. I would think that dildo size would be a better indicator of what sizes women prefer as opposed to asking them, because it's purely for pleasure. And the average size dildo women bought were 7.5 inches, but we have to take into account enough room for her to hold on to it. So the average insertable length was 6.5 inches with a girth of 4.6 inches, which is just slightly more girthier than the average preferred penis size. So for strictly solo pleasure, the dildos aren't that much bigger than what women say that they prefer in a man, which I found interesting. So just to jog your memory, the study said that women prefer average size men no longer than 6.3 inches, but they typically buy dildos around 6.5 inches. And the average girth women prefer is no bigger than 4.8 inches around. But the average girth of dildos women buy are 4.6 inches around. So there you go. It's not much different at all. However, the study showed that women do like a nice looking package. This means they like men's members to be proportional to their body. They like when men keep things looking good and groomed. And at least in the US, women prefer men to be circumcised. Now, I'm sure that's different in other countries where circumcision isn't the norm, but I didn't have anything on that. And all these things that I just mentioned were more important to women than size. So fellas, make sure you trim the hedges. Now, I don't know if they ship outside the US, but I recommend that you head over to manscaped.com and get yourself some grooming tools. They make stuff specifically for this. And no, I'm not getting paid for sending you over there. I use their stuff myself. But they have all kinds of stuff to keep yourself groomed and smelling nice in that area. And, you know, the studies show that that really matters to women. And I'm sure you want your girl to be spending as much time down there as possible. So you might want to make things enticing as possible. Now, does having a bigger size feel better or worse for women? Now, I've talked to numerous women over the years about whether or not they like men who are hung like a horse. And the general consensus is that really big men just hurt like a mofo. In fact, I had a few women tell me that they have actually run out of the room when they see a guy whip out his huge pecker. So that may not make much sense after seeing some porn star take on multiple hung men at the same time and love it. But I've read a few times that, one, most porn stars do not prefer a big guy in their personal life. And plus, those women, they stretch themselves out before a scene, you know, like using dildos and whatnot. So it's not as cut and dry as it seems. And I mean, there are some size queens out there who actively look for well-hung men, and they do love it, but they're on the rare side. And those women are usually very sexually experienced girls. So women may like a one-time or a short-term encounter with a hung dude, but most say that the post-sex pain of getting their insides rearranged by a giant member is not worth it in the long-term relationship. So yeah, big dicks are painful for a large majority of women. However, women also say that girth matters much more than length. And the reason why is the clitoral tissue that surrounds the vaginal wall becomes engorged and more sensitive. And when you enter her, you apply pressure when stretching her. And the friction on all that, the friction on those sensitive nerve endings that ultimately brings her to orgasm. I mean, it's a bit more involved than that, but that's the basics. So, in other words, the stretching of the vaginal wall to a certain extent is one of the many ways to bring a woman to orgasm. So the more girth, the better. But like I said, only to an extent. I mean, if you're smuggling a soda pop can between your legs, that's going to hurt. but most women say that girth is much more pleasurable than length in most cases. I mean, after all, the vaginal canal is only a few inches long, and of course it gets slightly longer with her arousal. So it isn't all about how deep that you can go. Plus, the G-spot isn't that deep. It's located only like 2 to 3 inches on the front wall of her vagina. And if you get her in the right position, you could hit her G-spot just from your typical penetration. On the other hand, for you men who are longer, you can hit some of those deep spots that will just have her exploding. And there are some women out there that really enjoy the deep penetration and the cervical stimulation. And her cervix can be located anywhere from like 3 to 7 inches from the vaginal opening. And some women can experience very intense orgasms from you hitting her cervix. But not all women find it enjoyable. Some find it very uncomfortable. But there are a few deep spots that longer men can hit that shorter men cannot. Plus, hitting some of those deep spots can also be very pleasurable for men too. I mean, your head rubbing up against her cervix while she's like grinding or something, I mean, can feel amazing. Now, do women make fun of men behind their backs for their size? I would say that in a majority of the cases, they do not. Unless, of course, she's pissed off at them for some reason. I'm sure you've heard women mad at their boyfriend or their ex just saying, well, he has a small wiener anyway. I actually dated this girl a while back who told me about her boyfriend before me. And I don't remember how the topic came up exactly, but she told me that he was, in her words, shockingly small. But even then, she didn't even make fun of him, and she didn't say that she didn't enjoy sex with him. She just made a statement during a conversation. There was no laughing involved. And personally, I can't think of any time I've heard a woman make fun of a man's size unless, like I said, she's pissed off and wants to attack his masculinity. Maybe they make fun of men in private among their girlfriends or something. I don't know, but I couldn't find any credible information on that. But interestingly, I did find a study that says women tend to remember their partner as being smaller than they actually are. So it seems that the size is a bigger deal to us than it is to women. But all these studies also mention that women don't care about your size so much as they do about the connection and their feelings for you. Because for women, it's much more about the connection they feel, how you stir up their emotions, your masculine frame, being a little rough in the bedroom, and how much you turn her on. A lot of it is going on in her head and her heart, not as physical as it is for us. But plus, a big part of bringing a woman to orgasm is you knowing what to do once you're down there. So, does size matter? Kinda. But we now know that girth matters more than length, and everyone is always so focused on their length when it's really more about girth. I would say that if you're in the neighborhood of 5 to 6 inches long with a girth of 4.5 inches to 4.8 inches, you're in the just right category. Unless, of course, you have a size queen on your hands or a woman with an exceptionally small vagina. Now, below 5 inches and smaller, you absolutely could still rock her world, but it'll just take a little extra effort on your part, like stimulating her clitoris using your fingers or sex toys in combination with penetration. I mean, we could all use a little extra help in that department, right? And if you're over 6.3 inches and a 4.8 inch girth, you're getting into big territory, which women do find quite enjoyable, but it could hurt her if you're too much bigger. Unless you have a girl that enjoys the deep penetration and some more than average stretching. How I see it, I mean, for the majority of you, there's absolutely nothing to be insecure about. Women enjoy what you're packing quite a bit. You just may need to understand a bit better what spots she enjoys you hitting. And, try different positions. Get your fingers working. I mean, and be sure to cut your fingernails. Introduce some toys into the mix. Try some different moves and be sure to get some feedback from her so you know you're on the right track or not. You may even want to look at some diagrams of what's going on down there for women. I mean, they have a lot going on down there. And if you're really hung up on your size, it might be a good idea to talk to a therapist. And if you're really small, like 3.9 inches or smaller, it might be a good idea to talk to both a therapist and a urologist. I read that a majority of the penis enlargement stuff is just all BS, you know, like penis pills and whatnot. They said that penis extenders do work, but not as much as most men would like them to. And it seems to be a lot of work. I believe one article that I read, it said that extenders only increase the size by a few centimeters. And that was after 2 months of doing everything required for a few hours every day. So don't count it out, but definitely look deep into it before you make any giant leaps and spend a lot of money on that stuff. Also, be sure to make your package look like you take care of it. Trim the hedges, like I said. This doesn't mean that you have to shave, but if you do, one thing I wanted to point out is that you should stick to just shaving your boys. I've read that when men shave everything, it kind of grosses women out because it makes your package look like one of a prepubescent boy. And, you know, women like men, not boys. So you still want to trim the hedges, but you also want to leave some there in the pelvic area. Doing some grooming and, of course, losing the belly fat will make your member look quite a bit bigger. I mean, remember, the studies said that the presentation is more important than your actual size. In other words, they're hoping it looks just as good as it's going to feel. Now, hopefully, this answered your questions on whether or not size matters and what sizes are big, average, and small. I mean, it certainly did for me. Like I said, I've never really looked deep into this, and I certainly learned a lot about what women prefer and how most men stack up next to each other. I mean, who knew that 6.5 inches was considered big? I sure as hell didn't. So, if you have found this video helpful, or any of my videos helpful, I would really appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up, and for you to share it with any of your friends and family. And I would also really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button down below and tick that little bell symbol next to it so you get real-time notifications of when I upload new videos. And in the description down below, not only will I have a link to both my contact page and my coaching page, but I also have a link to PayPal or my Bitcoin wallet address if you deem this video worthy of a donation. And if you scroll all the way down in the description area, I have posted a few links on how you can start earning money today with cryptos and stocks. Now, if you ever want to get ahead financially, you must invest your money. So that's it for this video. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Have a good one. Bye-bye.